This program is about unsolved mysteries. Whenever possible, the actual family members and police officials have participated in recreating the events. What you are about to see is not a news broadcast.
Tonight, a special Unsolved Mysteries report. Mysteries of alien beings. Who are they and where do they come from? Are they real or imagined? In recent years, hundreds of people have come forward with startling accounts of abduction by alien beings. Even though the descriptions are strikingly similar, there is no hard evidence that such beings actually exist. For many abductees, the memories are triggered by a vivid dream.
I was starting to have nightmares, really terrible nightmares that I could not explain. I found myself in a very brightly lit room. I had no idea where I was or why I was there. To my left, I could see my brother Jim, Chuck Rack, and Charlie Foltz sitting on some type of bench, and they were all naked. And while I'm trying to figure this out, I notice this figure, or a dark, shadowy type figure, emerging from this light, this bright light in front of me. It wasn't like other nightmares where you have just some strange, dumb dream or something, and you forget about it the next day. This would stick with me for days and days. It was like I couldn't think about anything else. I couldn't function. It was horrible.
Not so long ago, it seemed inconceivable that aliens and UFOs had become the topics of everyday conversation. Yet a recent poll revealed that nearly half of all Americans now believe that UFOs are real. In the next hour, a new, in-depth look at what may be the most remarkable phenomenon of our age. We'll take you to Area 51, a top-secret military installation tucked away in the remote Nevada desert. You'll meet a man who claims that he worked near Area 51 and witnessed the test flight of an alien spacecraft. For almost 50 years, the so-called Roswell incident has fascinated and confounded UFO researchers. Tonight, in an exclusive update, a new eyewitness account suggests that the Army did in fact recover the bodies of alien beings in 1947. And the fantastic saga of the Allagash 4, 4 young men who claim that they were abducted by aliens during a camping trip in the Maine wilderness. Their chilling story may seem unbelievable, but more and more people have become convinced that such accounts are based in fact, not fiction. Join us for this special report, Mysteries of Alien Beings.
It scared us. We didn't know what it was or didn't know what to think about it. Just like dumbfounded us. We were just like in awe.
There was no wings. There was no motors. There was no propellers.
I know it wasn't the planet Venus, and I know it was not atmospheric phenomena. These were some kind of craft moving over our house.
I noticed 2 cigarette-like shape things with the hump in the middle. So what the hell is that?
There's no way of knowing how many people believe that they've actually seen a UFO from outer space, but it seems safe to assume that reliable sightings now number well into the thousands. Typically, a sighting involves a single eyewitness. In other cases, a small group will see the same thing at the same time. In the most dramatic episodes, an entire community will report seeing the same object in the sky for weeks, months, or even years. That is exactly what happened over New York's Hudson Valley between 1983 and 1986. Perhaps no account was more convincing than that of Ed Burns, a computer engineer.
Out of nowhere, I got a lot of static on the radio. I thought maybe I was on the wrong number, and then I went over to turn the dial again, and that's when I looked up and saw this craft. It was a triangular chevron ship, and the back of that chevron had to be as large as a football field, at least. It was one solid piece of a chevron shape.
The wedge-shaped chevron object described by many Hudson Valley eyewitnesses was no stranger to UFO historians. It first appeared in 1947 when a pilot named Kenneth Arnold claimed that he encountered not one, but 9 mysterious flying objects while on a search and rescue mission over Washington state. When a headline writer tried to describe what Arnold saw, he coined the phrase flying saucer and helped launch the modern era of UFOs.
Soon people all over the country were reporting UFO sightings. But by the early 1950s, the Air Force had reached the conclusion, the correct conclusion in my opinion, that all UFO reports were explainable in down-to-earth, prosaic terms.
But some of the more impressive encounters could not be explained. When a wave of UFOs swarmed over the small town of Lubbock, Texas in 1951, a college student named Carl Hart Jr. took a remarkable series of photographs. Incredibly, more than 30 years later, the same V-shaped lights were described by many of the Hudson Valley eyewitnesses. Are the striking similarities a coincidence, wishful thinking, or perhaps part of an unmistakable pattern that stretches back hundreds of years?
There are many things that happened in the distant past that we are never going to understand fully. In fact, when you go into history and into folklore, you get intriguing accounts of odd phenomena seen in the sky.
This antique German woodcut depicts a, quote, frightful spectacle that occurred in Nuremberg in 1561. Could it be that the random chaos of lights and symbols depicted here is the same phenomenon that was photographed in the skies over Canada in 1974, more than 400 years later? This Renaissance painting of Madonna and Child seems perfectly normal. However, closer inspection reveals a strange craft hovering in the background, with an earthbound observer witnessing the event. For many historians, comparisons between past and present suggest that UFOs are not restricted to the modern age. Strange globes seen over Basel, Switzerland in 1566. A photograph taken in Salem, Massachusetts, 1952. A French token minted in the 1680s seems to show the underside of a circular object floating in the sky. Could it be the same object described during the 1980s by a group of American airmen stationed in England?
It seems amazing to scientists that if you take all these UFO reports at face value, that all the visitors have somehow managed to clean up after themselves perfectly. How come we have never had any picnic garbage? We've never had a leftover calling card, a shred of clothing, a piece of the spaceship, some of their motor oil dripping on the ground, nothing which could then be tested in our laboratories and clearly established as alien.
But many researchers believe the government does have proof of alien contact and has had it since 1947, when this startling headline appeared in the Roswell, New Mexico Daily Record. The story began with a violent storm on July 2nd, 1947. A few days later, a local rancher led 2 military officers to a pasture where something had crashed during the storm.
Why don't you stay there, Mr. Brazel? Lieutenant?
Major Jesse Marcel Sr., an intelligence officer and combat pilot, was unable to identify the debris.
Years after this incident happened, we would talk privately among ourselves about what the possibilities of this, what this thing was. And I feel that I know that we came to the conclusion that it was not of earthly origin.
Jesse Marcel Jr. was 11 years old at the time and vividly remembers a night his father brought pieces of the wreckage home. He is one of the few people still living that claims to have handled the debris.
Where'd you find all this stuff?
Marcel recalls that the most remarkable fragment was a short piece of I-beam covered with strange symbols and embossed markings.
It's like some kind of hieroglyphics.
This writing could be described as like hieroglyphics, Egyptian-type hieroglyphics, but not really. The symbols that were in the I-beams were more of a geometric type configuration in various designs. It had a violet purple type color and was actually an embossed part of the metal itself.
Other witnesses have claimed that the Army not only recovered the wreckage of a UFO, but the bodies of its occupants. Captain Pappy Henderson was stationed at Roswell in 1947. 2 years before he died, he described what he saw to his wife.
My husband told me the bodies were small, smaller than human bodies. The heads were larger, and the eyes were rather sunken and a little slanted. Clothing was of material unlike anything he'd seen before. They were strange. They were not of this earth. When my husband, who was a man of truth, who was trusted with 29 different Army aircraft planes, first pilot, aircraft commander, tells me this story, I believed him.
Shortly after the details of the crash were made public, the Army changed its story. They admitted to making a grave mistake and announced that the flying saucer wreckage was, in fact, debris from a downed weather balloon. For almost 50 years, the events that took place at Roswell and the official explanation have fueled suspicion and charges of cover-up. As recently as September 8, 1994, the Air Force released yet another report stating that the rumors of alien contact were groundless. In spite of these assertions, witnesses continue to come forward, insisting that the reports are true. Of all the new accounts, the story related by a man named Glenn Dennis is too compelling to be ignored. In 1947, Glenn Dennis was 22 years old and just out of college. That summer, he was working as a mortician's assistant at a funeral home in Roswell. 2 days before the saucer story broke, Dennis received a strange phone call from the Roswell Air Base.
Ballard Funeral Home.
Mr. Ballard, please.
He's not in, but this is Glenn Dennis. Can I help you?
Glenn, this is Captain Miser. I'm the mortuary officer over at the base.
Yes, sir.
Listen, I was just...
He was wanting to know what size hermetically sealed baby caskets did we have? Did we have specifically 3 feet, 6 inches, or did we have maybe no larger than a 4-foot hermetically sealed casket?
That afternoon, Glenn Dennis was called to transport an injured airman to the Roswell base. When he arrived, he was surprised to find the base infirmary surrounded by MPs. 2 ambulances parked at the curb immediately drew Glenn's attention.
I looked into the ambulance. I saw quite a bit of wreckage of some type. It looked like stainless steel that had come in contact with a high degree of heat. It was a purplish, bluish color. I noticed one large piece of the wreckage. It looked like there was some Egyptian hieroglyphics.
Sergeant, seal off that corridor.
The confusion at that day that I was out there was so great that I don't think anyone really knew what the other man was doing. And I don't think they even knew each other. I think they were brought in from different military bases or whatever.
Sir, is there anything you want me to do?
Can I help you?
I'm Glenn Dennis with the Ballard Funeral Home, and we have a contract with the base.
Well, this area is off limits today.
Yeah, but there was a crash outside. Do you want me to go back and get ready or anything?
Son, this is an off-limits area today. You're not allowed in here. Sergeant, escort this man back to the funeral home.
2 MPs came up and said, "Sir, we have to escort you back to your mortuary."
Hold it right there. Bring that man back here. Now, you get this straight. When you get back to town, you didn't hear anything and you didn't see anything because nothing happened here. Do you understand me?
That's not true. I just saw a crash outside.
Nothing happened.
You can't tell me what to do. I'm a civilian.
Oh, really?
And that's when he said, "Look, mister, somebody will be picking your bones out of the sand if you go start a lot of rumors."
You got me? Get him out of here.
There was a door opened into one of the supply rooms, and the nurse that I knew personally was coming out.
You better get out of here. You're gonna get in a lot of trouble.
Get him out of here!
Something very drastically was wrong at the base.
Close that door!
Naturally, I, was curious and mad and couldn't believe what was happening. So the first person I thought of was to contact a nurse to see what she might know, and could she bring me up to date on what was going on.
As Glenn Dennis was being escorted from the Roswell infirmary by 2 MPs, a group of doctors stumbled out of a storeroom overcome by noxious fumes. With them was a nurse who Glenn recognized.
You're gonna get in a lot of trouble.
Get him out of here!
Hoping to find an explanation for the strange events at the base, Glenn Dennis asked the nurse if she would meet with him.
You have to promise me that you will not mention my name.
The next day, the nurse agreed, on the condition that Glenn never reveal her identity.
Yesterday, I went into the supply room to pick up some bandages. And there were 2 officers there who ordered me to take notes during this.
What she said that she saw, that they were doing a partial autopsy.
And there were these 2 old hospital gurneys with these 2 little crash bags on top.
There was a crash bag that was open, and there was 2 very mutilated, very small bodies.
But they weren't children. I'd never seen anything like that. And then one of the officers had these long forceps.
They turned a hand over that had been severed, and they were explaining that it was a very fragile hand, only 4 fingers.
Let me draw it for you. Like an arm with 4 fingers with little suction cups.
The head was very large, the eyes were set back. They didn't have the earlobes or anything. There was like 2 canals, like 2 ear canals. There was only 2 orifices where the nose. The mouth, she explained, and what she said she wrote down was only like an inch slit. They described there was no teeth, that it was just like a piece of cartilage, maybe.
Then they opened the next bag, and there was a whole creature in there that wasn't mutilated. It was just horrible. I'd never seen anything like that in my life.
In all, the nurse claimed to have seen 3 bodies. She was adamant that none of them was earthly in origin. After Glenn left the nurse, he returned to his office. When he casually unfolded the newspaper on his desk, it was the infamous edition of the Roswell Daily Record. Glenn never saw the nurse again. A few weeks later, rumors circulated that she had died in a plane crash after being transferred out of the country. To this day, Glenn Dennis remains convinced that the details of her story are true.
There had to be some type of a body present. There had to be something there. I don't think the nurse lied about it because I don't think she knew how to lie in the first place. And I just think something happened very unusual, and I doubt very seriously if the world will ever know what happened.
I'm absolutely convinced that the Roswell events crystallized government secrecy about UFOs. I think Roswell became important to the military because, possibly for the first time, they actually could get their hands on the remains of a flying saucer. They had the debris. They had bodies. They had possibly the remains of a propulsion unit. This was an unprecedented opportunity.
600 miles west of Roswell, somewhere in the midst of the vast Nevada desert, is a top-secret military installation. It's been called the Ranch, the Funny Farm, Dreamland, Groom Lake, and most commonly, Area 51. It doesn't appear on any map, and although it can be seen with the naked eye from an adjoining ridge, the Air Force insists that Area 51 does not exist.
It's been there since the 1960s, and it's a site where extremely advanced aviation technology is tested, usually under cover of darkness. Some of these objects actually look like what people have reported as UFOs.
This amateur video was shot near Area 51 using a special digital zoom lens. Skeptics say the strange lights seen here and in other videos are experimental military aircraft, but others remain convinced that they are in reality the test flights of alien spacecraft.
The only thing I was told is that I was going to be working on an advanced propulsion system.
Bob Lazar says he worked for 6 months at a secret installation near Area 51.
Something different than a jet or a rocket, something different than a propeller, which I thought was fantastic. That was exactly what I was interested in. I had no idea that this was of extraterrestrial origin.
As astonishing as it may seem, Bob Lazar claims that the United States government is in possession of alien spacecraft. One of them, nicknamed the Sport Model, measures 52.8 feet in diameter. Lazar claims he witnessed a test flight in March of 1989.
The flight of the disc was short. The bottom of the disc itself glowed a very faint blue. As it rose to about 20 or 30 feet, the sound dissipated and it was completely silent and hung silently in the air, which was quite a sight for something that size. It moved very slowly over to the left, very slowly over to the right, and then sat back down. It was very uneventful. Well, as uneventful as a flying saucer test could be.
While some charge that Bob Lazar is a fraud and lacks scientific credentials, others maintain that his story is essentially true.
In the 5 years I've been working on this, I've accumulated approximately 24 other witnesses who will corroborate the story. People who worked at Groom Lake and Area 51 in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, all of whom have different bits and pieces that would tend to corroborate. People who have seen the flying discs, people who have worked at the base and watched the tests, people that have been told by the superior officers that these things came from somewhere else.
When Unsolved Mysteries asked the Air Force about Area 51, they refused to acknowledge its existence. Bob Lazar believes that the shroud of official secrecy is hiding much more than alien spacecraft.
I did have the opportunity to view autopsy photos, and when they were taken, I couldn't even guess. They were black and white. The being was dead. It was only an upper chest photograph of the being. Its chest was cut in a T fashion with the skin pulled back, and what was removed was one large organ.
I think the situation has become more complex as the years have passed, since there seems to be the possibility that we're dealing not just with one species of extraterrestrial, but possibly several who may have several motives.
Any discussion of the possible motives of extraterrestrials who may be visiting the Earth is purely speculative. We have no way of knowing. But if UFO reports are taken literally, they certainly do suggest that we are dealing with a technological civilization. In other words, a civilization with an advanced scientific knowledge. You don't get advanced scientific knowledge without a great degree of curiosity. I would expect that an extraterrestrial civilization would visit the Earth for exactly the same reason we visit the remote outposts of our own planet, to learn things.
The implications are almost impossible to comprehend. Skeptics maintain that the very concept of alien contact is absurd, but others suggest that the evidence can no longer be ignored. In recent years, hundreds of credible, ordinary people have come forward with alarming reports of being taken aboard alien spacecraft against their will. In a moment, the remarkable story of 4 men who believe they shared a close encounter of the fourth kind, alien abduction.
I was starting to have nightmares, really terrible nightmares that I could not explain. I found myself in a very brightly lit room. I had no idea where I was or why I was there. To my left, I could see my brother Jim, Chuck Rack, and Charlie Foltz sitting on some type of bench, and they were all naked. I was wondering why they weren't helping me, because I felt like I was in danger. And while I'm trying to figure this out, I notice this figure, or a dark, shadowy type figure, emerging from this light, this bright light in front of me. I would wake up sweating and breathing heavily and just in a state of terror and shock.
Are you okay, Jack?
For years, Jack Weiner told no one about the nightmares except his wife, Mary. Then in late 1988, Jack's twin brother, Jim, confessed that he was being haunted by the same disturbing nightmares.
They started happening more and more often, and they seemed to be becoming more and more real in terms of what I was remembering about these things. There were always certain elements of the dream that were the same, some type of creature, and being helpless, being violated was a feeling I often woke up with. It was a real surprise to find out that Jim was having identical dreams, because I didn't want to talk about my dreams except to Mary. And then when I found out he was having them, it was like, wow, something is going on here, but we just couldn't put our fingers on it.
In every dream, the twins were with Charlie Foltz and Chuck Rack, 2 friends he had met in art school. The twins began to wonder if their nightmares could be connected to a bizarre experience the 4 men had shared 12 years earlier during a camping trip in Maine. In August of 1976, Charlie, Chuck, Jack, and Jim spent 2 weeks along the Allagash Wilderness Waterway. The Allagash covers thousands of acres in the northernmost part of the state. One of the area's most prominent features is a mountain named by the Abenaki Indians. They called it Katahdin. To them, it is a sacred place. On the second night out, Jim noticed a bright object in the sky.
It's right over there. It was just floating above the treetops. It didn't seem to be moving in any direction. And I looked at it through the binoculars for maybe 15 seconds, 30 seconds, and it suddenly just winked out from the outside edges inward.
It's gone. Where is it?
I mean, it literally just went like that, and it was gone.
Very strange, wasn't it?
I thought maybe it was a weather balloon or perhaps a helicopter that had just turned a light off that was flying over, but there was something about this thing that left me with an odd feeling that wasn't quite right, but I really didn't dwell on it.
Well, let's get that tent up.
The men continued through the Allagash Wilderness. On the 4th day, they decided to try some night fishing. They built a bonfire to mark their campsite.
You guys still want to give me a hand with this fire?
That far north at night, it is pitch black, and we had a nice, good-sized fire going. Not too large that it would get out of control and burn the forest, but it was borderline. You know, it was a fairly good fire that would have lasted 4 hours bare minimum. And then we struck out onto the lake just as it was getting dark.
Chuck Rack was the first to realize they weren't alone.
I had a feeling that there was someone staring at me from behind me. I turned over my right shoulder like that, and I saw this large, round globe of light that looked exactly like what we had seen 2 nights previously.
Hey guys, look at that.
It was a type of a thing where we didn't have to ask what or where. We just seemed to know where he was looking, and we all turned and looked.
It had this roiling effect to it, like a miniature sun. Very, very bright. It lit the treetops up like daylight. And it was absolutely silent.
After looking at it for what seemed like several moments, we decided to signal this thing. And that's when Charlie picked up the flashlight and squeezed off a message, SOS.
The response was instant.
The sensation I had was one of absolute elation. I couldn't believe it, that we were really going to find out what it was. We attempted to communicate with it, and it actually was responding.
Well, when the light started coming toward us, my curiosity was satisfied. And I just dropped the flashlight. The only thought in my mind was to get to shore. I never looked back.
I remember looking over my shoulder, trying to keep an eye on this object as it was coming up behind us, and it was getting very close. I mean, it was almost on top of us at this point. And I remember thinking that we're not going to outrun this thing. There's just no way. It was coming too quickly.
The next memory any of the men had was being back on shore, staring up at the bright object as though posing for a portrait.
I remember thinking, my God, I could pick up a stone and bounce it off the side of this thing. That's how close it was.
I picked up the flashlight again and flashed at it a second time. This time there was no response from it. It seemed to just drift away from us.
As it was moving up, it seemed to implode somehow. And it shrank. And then all of a sudden, at a higher level, it reappeared again. And then all of a sudden, it just streaked away. Very, very fast, and within a few seconds, it was like a star, just another light in the sky.
I remember stepping out of the canoe and going up to the campsite, and I remember there was no panic. People seemed to be very relaxed.
Hey guys, what do you want to do about this fire? It's out.
All the men agreed that they were out on the lake for less than 20 minutes. The huge bonfire should have blazed bright for hours, yet inexplicably, only coals remained.
Let's just go to bed. We don't want to rebuild the fire.
The unusual thing is that we didn't stay up for hours and discuss this thing, which is what you would think, 4 young guys on a camping trip would do. And we just seemed very fatigued, and we just wanted to go to bed. The next morning, we got up and got our camp together and paddled to the next campsite.
The men spent another 10 days in the Allagash wilderness, but never again saw the bizarre light. As the years went by, they told friends and family about the UFO, but no one really believed them. The men could hardly believe it themselves. Then the nightmares began for Jim and Jack Weiner. Finally, Jim contacted UFO researcher Ray Fowler for help.
Come on in, I want you to meet someone.
Fowler suggested the Allagash Four undergo hypnosis with a trained hypnotherapist to recover details of the sighting. Fowler has since written a book about the case called the Allagash Abductions. From the beginning, Ray Fowler suspected the men had been abducted by a UFO, but did not tell them. One by one, they underwent hypnosis. They all promised not to tell each other about what they recalled until all the sessions were complete. Each of the men, Jim Weiner, Chuck Rack, Jack Weiner, and Charlie Foltz, describe what appears to be a classic abduction experience. Afterward, each of them drew illustrations of their incredible recollections. These are their actual paintings and drawings. All four said they were taken aboard the craft. The aliens forced them to strip naked and seemed to be conducting medical examinations. The aliens apparently took samples of the men's skin and body fluids, their blood, urine, and semen. What follows are excerpts from the original hypnosis sessions recorded in 1988.
They don't know what to do. I think they think I'm going to come after them. I feel like I want to. I feel like I want to. The first one that comes near me, I'm going to throttle them. That's what I want to do, is throttle them. I don't like these things. I don't care where they come from. They shouldn't be doing this to people.
Jim's brother Jack found the faces terrifying.
They're right there. Their face is right in my face. I don't know why. I don't want to know. I don't want to know what they want. Oh, they're saying things. They're explaining things with their eyes. In my head, they're saying, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. We won't harm you. They say, do what we say. Just do what we say.
Charlie Foltz was the next to be examined.
I'm afraid that it's like a doctor's office. Like that. It's cold like a doctor's office is cold. They put the panel over your chest. And they scrape your arms, your chest, your legs and thighs. We shouldn't be here. I just keep thinking I want to be back in the canoe.
Chuck Rack had a good view of what the aliens were doing to Charlie.
See some sort of device on him. They've got a, it looks like a silvery, and it looks like it's got curves on it. It's almost like it sucks something. He's got his head tipped way back. It's almost like he's in pain. We're just there. We can't help him. We're just, all we can do is watch him.
I don't know if you're aware of it, and you probably aren't because you haven't been talking to each other.
After the hypnosis sessions, Ray Fowler brought the Allagash Four together. For the first time, they discovered that each of them had recalled the same horrifying events.
We were amazed that Jack would say something about how he remembered the light, or Chuck Rack would say something that he remembered, or Charlie would say, and we'd sit there my God, that's exactly what we remembered.
One person would pause to take a breath, and the next person would pick up, and you knew what they were going to say. You knew what they were going to say. And when they paused for breath, you could continue.
It was just amazing to come to the realizations that all these things were really true and that they really had meaning. And it was also kind of nice to know that I wasn't going insane having these nightmares, that they were, in fact, real memories of an event that did happen.
Ultimately, each of the Allagash 4 took polygraph tests and passed easily. It is clear that they believe their memories are real. To skeptics, however, stories of alien abduction do not stand up to scrutiny. Some suggest that images from the popular culture, like these scenes from the 1953 science fiction movie Invaders from Mars, may be the inspiration for memories of alien abduction.
Some of the stories that you hear about abductions are right out of the films. I mean, almost verbatim.
Dr. William Cohn is a clinical psychologist who specializes in the study of repressed memory and hypnotic therapy.
It's media-driven. It's cyclical. You get some good cases on TV. People hear about them. They think they may have had the same thing happen. It sort of feeds upon itself.
Usually these are people who have no interest in abductions, have not read about it, are even unfamiliar with the nature of the beings, and are shocked and astounded when they hear someone else has had these experiences as well, or that there is material in the media about it.
My experience of what's going on is the investigators have a very clear-cut agenda about what they're looking for. So if you get somebody that's doing UFO abduction research, this is a person that generally has already decided that UFO abductions are real, that thousands of people are having them. They have a symptom list, and if you come in the door with those symptoms, then you must have been abducted.
It really doesn't work like that. The person comes because they've heard that I'm open to listen to something which other therapists or other mental health professionals have not been able to listen to. They're highly doubtful. They don't want this to be true. This is not a club anyone wants to belong to.
If you were to tell somebody 40 years ago that they would be able to see on an invention called a television set, which didn't exist, a meteorite crashing into a planet that they can now watch at home, that's a reality check, folks. And yet, 40 years ago, that's science fiction. This happened. If you believe it, that's all right. If you don't believe it, I don't care. I don't care, because it did.
When the Greek philosopher Aristotle first suggested that the world was round, skeptics dismissed it as fantasy. When Copernicus theorized that the sun, not the earth, was the center of our solar system, many considered it heresy. When Jules Verne wrote that a human being would someday travel to the moon, science rejected it as pure fiction. Perhaps the day will come when our beliefs about the existence of UFOs and alien encounters will undergo a similar transformation.
We have these two camps, the scientists searching for life among the stars, and the UFO believers thinking that they've already landed. I think in both cases we share the dream. The dream is that we're not alone in the universe, that we have, if not brothers and sisters, perhaps cousins out among the stars.
Publicly, the scientific community remains skeptical. Privately, however, they are working to achieve contact. NASA anticipates that within the next decade, the Voyager 1 space probe will become the first human artifact ever to leave our solar system. On board is a message in a bottle that has been dropped into the vastness of space.
As the Secretary General of the United Nations, an organization of 147 member states who represent almost all of the human inhabitants of the planet Earth, I send greetings on behalf of the people of our planet.
It is either the greatest hoax in human history, an unprecedented mass hallucination, or perhaps the single most important event since the dawn of civilization. For the hardened skeptic, proof will remain elusive until an alien spacecraft is placed on public display or an extraterrestrial appears on the evening news. Until that moment, one of the greatest mysteries of our age will remain unsolved.